Hi, I am a 4-mana legendary artifact planeswalker equipment with 4 loyalty. Kira.
Hi, I'm the modern-day Siege Rhino, Maya.
And today we are talking about building standard decks. We've talked a lot about Pro Tour metagame. We've talked a lot about going to an FNM, but we've not actually gotten into what standard decks look like and how to make one and where you can find lists. So today we are going to provide you with a bunch of tools to build your decks, brew your own, where to find popular lists.
Actually building a standard deck is a very important part in this whole playing standard process, whether you're playing online or in person. So it does beg the question, Kira, what is a standard deck?
A standard deck is typically a set of 75 cards split into a 15-card sideboard and a 60-card main board with no more than 4 of any card in your 75. This with the exception of basic lands. If you wanted to, your standard deck could be 75 forests. I would not recommend that in the slightest, but that is a legal standard deck.
I've played a modern deck with 5 cards that weren't basic lands.
I'm horrified yet delighted. Your standard deck broadly contains only cards from the most recent 3 years of sets, but double check. With the inclusion of foundations, there have been a lot of reprints, and there may be cards that have an older set symbol on them that are actually still currently standard legal or have become standard legal again because of a reprinting. You can find information about what cards are standard legal by visiting what'sinstandard.com to double check or use the term legal in on Scryfall. Scryfall has a lot of really awesome keyword and query search phrases that you can use. And you can also use F for format and :standard to refine that search to cards that are legal in standard.
Scryfall, one of the best deck building tools for finding inspiration.
I love Scryfall. I use Scryfall for everything. You can use it for searching for art that has squirrels in it. It can do everything. We love you, Scryfall.
We love you.
A standard main deck usually falls into some kind of archetype, being some combination of aggro, mid-range, control, combo, tempo, or some blend of multiple of those archetypes.
Often the case.
Oftentimes, your deck does not unilaterally fall into one singular archetype, but has potentially a combo main board with the potential to move into a mid-range strategy post-board.
Take, for instance, Dimir Bounce, which is a mid-range tempo deck.
A sideboard typically contains cards that are more matchup dependent. A sideboard will look very different depending on what archetype your main board falls into, but we'll do a deep dive episode into sideboards and sideboarding in the future. It is definitely coming. Brace yourselves.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a long one. 75 cards. 60 in the main board, 15 in the 5.
Yes.
15 in the 5?
15
in the side. Can I just pull apart 4 commander decks and shove them together?
Broadly speaking, no. While many cards from your commander deck may be legal in standard, commander tends to be a much more powerful format than standard, and as such, it is best to check whether a card is legal online before bringing it to a tournament. Cards like Soul Ring, Mana Vault, Force of Will, and even some sillier cards like the Wise Mothman are either too powerful for or not designed for play in 4 of constructed formats.
You're telling me that I can't play my Mana Crypts in Standard?
Worse than not being able to play your Mana Crypts in Standard, you can no longer play your Mana Crypts in Commander.
Where else am I going to play them?
In 7-Point Highlander.
And Vintage.
This announcement sponsored by the 7-Point Highlander of Australia Foundation.
TM Limited Trademark.
TM Limited Trademark, TM, copyright 2025.
So, if I can't shove 4 commander decks together, then I'm going to need inspiration as to what I want decks to look like, where I want to, dip my toes, the kinds of decks that are doing well. So, where can I find other people's decks?
Almost anywhere. A great place to start in terms of commonly played decks is MTG Goldfish, which have a metagame breakdown of most formats. This being Pioneer, Pauper, Commander, Penny, 1v1. They've got lists for every single format. MTG Top 8 keeps track of a wide variety of events and shows you what decks are winning or conversely, what decks are losing, or MTG decks, which functions as a hybrid of both MTG Goldfish and MTG Top 8. Short of that, most players are happy to discuss decks and deck lists with you when outside a match. Discord channels from your local stores or even Magic content creators can be gold mines for the newest interesting decks. Also, Magic content creators are great at sharing their lists. People like Ash Lizzle, Covert Go Blue, Aspiring Spike all share their deck lists and often sideboard guides for their viewers, although occasionally more detailed information is locked behind the Patreon paywall. For their deck lists, you can check out places like Moxfield or AetherHub. Finally, Magic article websites are a great place to get deck lists and insights from professional players. The one that jumps to mind is TCG Player, which hosts all of the former Channel Fireball content as well, but there are other great article sites out there.
Kira, just for solidarity, what's Moxfield?
Moxfield is a deck building and deck hosting website where you can have a profile of your own and you can have stored all of your Commander, Modern, Pioneer, Standard lists, as well as the ability to copy other lists that you've seen and import them there. The Moxfield interface is wildly useful in terms of showing you if you have too many copies of a card in your deck. If you're playing Standard and you accidentally add a 5th copy, it'll let you know that you have too many copies of a card in your deck. It'll let you know the rough estimated value of your deck in the bottom. It'll show you how many cards are in your main and your sideboard. It can group cards into type or mana value or price. It is a fantastic deck building tool, and I use it for all of my decks. I unfortunately don't have the brain power to store my deck lists on multiple websites, so Moxfield is where I keep everything.
Moxfield is also really great because of its format function. You can actually set the format of the deck that you're building. So especially for newer players, if you're looking to build a standard deck, you can set the format to standard, and Moxfield will not let you add cards that are not in standard to your standard decks. I cannot tell you how many times I've tried to add 3 Spell Pierce to my sideboard and not understood why Moxfield wasn't letting me add it until I realized that it wasn't actually in standard. So
it is in standard now, though.
It is now.
It is now in Aether Drift, but it was not in standard for a very long time, actually.
Yeah, for a while. It was one of the cards I was expecting to see in Foundations, but didn't. So it is a very good way to double check that the cards in your deck are in fact legal. If the card is not legal or becomes illegal, it will show up with a little red exclamation mark as you're building your deck, which will let you know that it is not supposed to be there or something is wrong. So Kira, I like a lot of the decks that you brew. I think they're interesting. I think they're dynamic. But sometimes I worry a little bit that I'm being a copycat. I'm stealing all your hard work. Is it rude to copy other people's decks?
It is in no way considered rude to copy someone's deck. Oftentimes, if that's something you're worried about, if you played against someone at your local F&M and you really loved this interesting Delirium deck that they had put together, courtesy would dictate, ask them politely if you might have the deck list, if they could share it with you. There's no need to surreptitiously start taking notes of every single card that you see them play and try and figure out how to cobble the deck together. Just ask. Unlike more casual formats, the goal of a match of Standard is ultimately to win. And it is widely accepted that most people will be playing a deck that is at least reminiscent of other popular high-performing decks in the format. Net decking is something that, especially for new players, is actively encouraged as a way to lean on the expertise of more experienced players and develop your own sense of what is and is not good in the format. That being said, don't feel priced into only net decking if you have the itch to brew a Glimmers deck. Go for it. All Standard decks, after all, started as a brew or started as an idea or 50% of a popular deck that I think this card would combo with better. There is no ultimately wrong way to build a Standard deck.
Well, adding Shieldred the Apocalypse is close.
There are certain Standard crimes that we can forgive every now and then because the card quality is just that good. But please just put her in the sideboard.
It's where she belongs. So, I have a few ideas for decks. I've got some degenerate combo nonsense brewing in my mind. Where should I go to buy my cards?
The first place you should always look at buying singles from is your local game store. While it may not necessarily be the cheapest way to get your hands on large numbers of high-demand cards, supporting your local game store is vital to ensure the ongoing vibrancy of the place where you and your friends go and play Magic. Buying cards from your LGS ensures that the store continues to buy even more cards to sell in the future. Short of that, there are a number of well-stocked and competitively priced online marketplaces for Magic cards. We're, of course, going to be mentioning a few places that are Australia-specific because that is where we are located. But in the broader sense, the most famous ones include Haruruya for the Asian and Oceania market, TCG Player and Card Kingdom for the US market, and Card Market for the EU. In Australia, you can look at more local places like MTG Mate, Josh and Pat's, Plenty of Games, Maze of Fitzroy, General Games. There is no shortage of wonderful independent stores here in Australia that are able to support your card buying needs. If you're patient and you'd like to snag a deal on some cards, many local areas will have buy, sell, trade groups across various social media platforms. Please note that while often good value, these groups are high risk, as there is rarely any real warranty, limited recourse for bad or damaged product, and the chance of being sold fake cards.
I've had this happen to me. And look, it does not feel good. I rocked up to a modern event when I was 15 with my brand new $300 deck and was disqualified from the tournament for bringing proxies. It's not a great experience when it does happen. So make sure that you're diligent, make sure you know what you're looking for, and make sure you know how to identify fake cards if it hasn't worked. Always steer clear of dodgy behavior. And when buying and selling on these marketplaces, check for references. Oftentimes in these buy-sell trade groups, one of the ways that you can determine whether somebody is or is not acting in good faith is asking for a call out on for people who have interacted with this person before in a buy-sell trade sort of manner, and they will often be able to provide some sort of historical account as to the fact that they are in fact operating in good faith.
The best way and the most safe way to get your cards is from authorized sellers, that being your local game store or an online shop like these TCG Player, Card Kingdom, Haruruya type places.
I would say your LGS is still the best place to get them because you can see the cards that you're buying. They will put them on the bench, they will let you look at them, and they are actively incentivized not to sell you fake cards because if they do, they will get closed down real quick.
Yep. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Yep. Uh-huh. All right. So I love Standard, but I also love me some limited gameplay. So what about drafting?
It's so funny that you mentioned drafting because drafting is a great way to get into Standard. Drafting Standard cards to build your Standard collection is a great way to start. Not only do you get the opportunity to pick the cards that you're looking for out of the packs that you're drafting, but between prizing, the play experience, and the draft packs, drafting is often the best value way in terms of long-term establishment of building a Standard collection. Drafting also has the additional benefit of being an excellent way to develop your Magic and especially mid-range gameplay and fundamentals, on top of just generally being an awesome and fun thing to do in the Magic community.
Drafting is awesome, and drafting the newest Standard set, especially given they come out pretty much every 6 to 8 weeks now, means that drafting pretty much remains fresh for the entire period of its life, especially these new Standard decks. And I don't know about you, but I love flashback drafting on Arena.
Typically, your local game store will offer the most recent Standard set for draft. So currently, it's Aether Drift. If you're listening to this in 3 months, it's going to be Tarkir Dragonstorm. If you've somehow managed to build a time machine and you're listening to this like 4 months ago, it's Duskmorn. Don't know how you managed that. Congratulations and welcome back. However, there are opportunities. Some game stores will run what are sometimes referred to as throwback drafts, and they might have a box of Brothers War lying around, and they offer a throwback draft to draft Brothers War. In those instances, if you are a relatively new player, that is also a great way to get your hand on some cards that you may not have had a chance to draft in the first place. I remember last year in winter, we did a Kaldheim throwback draft for it being the middle of winter. And it was really fun to get to go revisit Kaldheim and get to play with snow-covered permanents again. That being said, most stores are going to be offering the current set for draft, which, as we've said, great way to get your hand on standard cards, great way to build your collection.
Oftentimes as well, draft night is Friday night. It is the night of the Friday Night Magic, which is, again, the best time to sort of ingratiate yourself into a community of players and see whether or not they are or are not playing standard, and even trying to cultivate a standard community there. Friday Night Magic is so much fun, and drafting is so much fun, that it is such a wonderfully good way to not only develop your skills and develop your collection, but just have a good time with friends and with people who have, clearly, a like-minded interest.
Well, look, that's all we have for you today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. New episodes release on Mondays at 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Until then, you can keep track of all of our releases at Raise MTG on both Instagram and Blue Sky. You can find me on the same platforms at Kira Bobira and kirabobira.jpg, and Maya at Maya MTG. A big thank you to the State Library of Victoria for the ongoing use of their space. And until next week, remember, Blor's defenses are impervious.